we're talking about residential construction here today, folks. Okay. You just bought an apartment within the last 12 months and you completely gut rehabilitated the entire thing, soup to nuts. You basically took an old apartment in an old building and you gave it a brand new life.
The first step is we usually hire an architect if we're doing a gut renovation. So that's super important to make sure your contractors have all those things, that they're qualified to actually do the job when they take your deposit, because they might sign documents with you, right? You might have agreed to something, but it's up to your building if they're going to allow them to work or not. It's up to your super if they're going to allow them every single day to start working and bringing their crews in.
Now we're talking buildings that are usually a little bit larger in this situation, especially, right? Like, so just to reiterate, you can't skip going to the DOB. Like, you can't do an alteration agreement before you already present it to the DOB, correct? What happens if somebody goes rogue?
Call the Department of Buildings, they give you a stop work order.
Give us an example about that. Like, like the line difference within a building. Like, is it?
So we had
like
in
plumbing thing, or?
Yeah, I'll give you a specific example actually. So in
All right. We are back with another episode 2, keeping it real estate, uncovering the NYC construction process. I'm Harry Zikos, and I am joined by my business partner and good friend, Mike Falcheri. Between the two of us, we have decades upon decades of New York City brokerage and construction expertise. And here we're here today to talk about construction in New York, a daunting task, and how to navigate. So I guess, Mike, let's break it down. We're talking about residential construction here today, folks. Okay. There's more or less 3 different types of construction that people will take on, or 3 types of renovations people will take on. In the context of maybe, let's say, like a small house, a co-op, or a condo building, perhaps, safe to assume that we have 3 different types of improvements that you could do to the property, right? One is like the meme of like the landlord special, right, Mike? You sit there, you take the paintbrush, you throw paint on top of the outlets, you throw paint on top of just about every surface that you could think of to make it quote unquote fresh. Like you see that a lot in like lower income rental housing. It's like its own meme special. Then you have things like like a level 2 renovation. Maybe you take out tiles and you swap out tiles, but you're not really doing heavy demolition, in a bathroom, let's say, or you add a fixture, or you replace a toilet, you replace maybe an appliance or something like that, or you resurface something. Maybe you sand floors and put new polyurethane finish or stain. And then we have gut rehab, right? So I mean, we have a couple different layers to dive into on this episode together, Mike. I want you to go into some of the specifics because you are the best person to talk to about this subject. You just bought an apartment within the last 12 months and you completely gut rehabilitated the entire thing, soup to nuts. You basically took an old apartment in an old building and you gave it a brand new life. Like you went full into it. You didn't go, half into any of this. So I want you to maybe take us through some of the process. If somebody was interested in really just like changing everything in a space, go into it. Go tell us what you experienced there.
So I think it depends, on your building, your level of expertise, and if you've ever done a renovation in the city, right? The process is somewhat the same, whether you're doing an apartment or a house. The rules and regulations are pretty much the same. But depending, on if you're in a house or a co-op or condo, the process can be different. There are certain limitations that not only the city and state can put on you, but your co-op or condo board or management company.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's multiple ways to do it. I think if you're knowledgeable enough, it's getting your building, if you're in a co-op or condo, it's getting your building's offering plan, getting their alteration agreement, and making yourself familiar with it. The next step, in my opinion, would be, and the alteration agreement, for those who don't know, is pretty much your building's rules, regulations, guidelines on what you have to do, what paperwork you have to submit, things like that, and pretty much the steps you have to go through in order to do a renovation in your building. So, for my particular situation and what most of our clients run into when they're doing their renovations, the first step is we usually hire an architect if we're doing a gut renovation. The architect's job is to pretty much be able to take the existing plans that you have of the apartment, measure everything, show you the layout, show you where all the fixtures are, all your plumbing fixtures, gas lines, things like that. Then you work with the architect. Depends on what type of architect you hire. Some of them strictly just do plans for you. You tell them, here's the existing plan, go measure it, draw it for me, and then you tell them, what you want for your future plans, and they do those measurements for you. There's other architects, and you pay more for this, that will actually help you with the design process. So walk you through, say, what are your goals or what are your wish list for this apartment, right? Do you want washer and dryer in unit? What size beds do you want to be able to fit in the bedrooms? Do you want a home office? Do you want an open kitchen layout or closed kitchen concept? Do you want to be able to have electric or gas stoves, right?
Mhm.
Do you want to be able to have a tub in the bathroom or a standing shower? All these different things, the architect or designer could kind of help you put that together and optimize the apartment for your own enjoyment and then for resale value in the future. So the first thing you would do is realistically go hire an architect or consult an architect to give you existing plans and work with you on to create your new plans.
Mhm.
Then I didn't have an interior designer. Some clients do hire them. Then the next step would be, while your architect is filing the plans with the Department of Buildings, you are on the other end getting your finishes, right? The picking out the cabinets, picking out the appliances, the tiles, the floors, the bathroom fixtures, all those different interiors. This is the time where you go pick those out from vendors and see what the lead time is for all of those. While you're picking those and the Department of Buildings is doing their review, they'll give you either an approval or they won't approve, and you have to go and fix, your filing, and they'll give you feedback on what you've done wrong. If everything goes right, your next step is you go to the co-op board and management and you start to put together your alteration agreement. In your alteration agreement, usually on top of your architect who has to sign off on your plans, they usually want to see who your general contractor is going to be, your plumber, and your electrician. All three of them usually have to always be insured, and they always have to be licensed by New York State. And those are usually two mandatory things in order for any sort of contractor or service worker to step into a building and do work in New York City. So that's super important to make sure your contractors have all those things, that they're qualified to actually do the job when they take your deposit, because they might sign documents with you, right? You might have agreed to something, but it's up to your building if they're going to allow them to work or not. It's up to your super if they're going to allow them every single day to start working and bringing their crews in.
Now we're talking buildings that are usually a little bit larger in this situation, especially, right? Like, so just to reiterate, you can't skip going to the DOB. Like, you can't do an alteration agreement before you already present it to the DOB, correct?
It depends on the alteration you're doing. If it requires DOB sign off and filing, right? A
Yeah.
gut renovation where you're changing out electrical, you're moving gas lines, you're changing out all the plumbing fixtures, right? In my case, we added washer dryer, right? So we had to extend the waste lines and everything.
Hmm.
So it just depends, But in this case, for a gut renovation, you're always going to have to file it. Things like cosmetic, like we were discussing before in the intro, that's building by building. They'll usually want to see, at least license and insurance for the guys coming in, so the building's protected.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily always have to file with the Department of Buildings.
There's a discrepancy with alterations, right? Like there's an alteration type 1 and alteration type 2. Would
Yeah.
you maybe be able to break those down a little bit for us?
So I would say the main difference, without going into too much detail, because I want to make sure we move things along, and we'll go into more depth with construction, more of the step-by-step process.
Hmm.
But the real difference is if you're going to change the use case of the asset, right? Or try to change the certificate of occupancy, right? So usually taking two apartments, combining it to one, taking one, turning it to two, which was a landlord special when they were changing all the laws.
Yeah.
Um, taking, I have a client, we'll see what they end up doing, but they did take a residential and change they had a temporary C of O, to change it to commercial. And if they end up, selling it in the future, there's definitely more value in it being residential, but it's a question of, do we want to jump through all these hoops? It was a different time back then.
Hmm.
We had to shut down gas lines, and now it's almost impossible for the city to give you gas. They're trying to get everyone to move to electric. So we'll see, what happens with that.
Hmm. Hmm. So basically, you don't always need to file, but the building, assuming it's a condo or co-op, generally needs to have some sort of informed consent. You have to go through
If
any
you're
kind
gonna
of
touch
process.
any plumbing, if you're gonna touch any gas lines, right, they're gonna want you to have this filed. They're gonna want to protect themselves and make sure you know what you're doing.
What
Uh,
happens if somebody goes rogue? What happens if I just go in there, I bought an apartment, I got a bunch of cash, and I think I can do whatever I want because I'm, king of my own
s-
universe here. What
Co-op
happens if I
board,
don't file? What if I just start bringing in guys to do work?
you call the Department of Buildings, they give you a stop work order.
What kind
They'll
of
shut you
fines would I
down.
experience if I went that direction without filing?
It's going to be a few $1,000s, but it's just the bigger cost is you having to carry the asset. A lot of people typically, depending on what you're doing, right? If you're doing this fix and flip or value add, you're using OPM, right? Other people's money, and there's a cost to doing that. So,
Right.
do you really want to roll the dice of having the Department of Buildings come stop you and for 6 months, 8 months, whatever it may be? If you're dealing with landmarks and you have to go through that process again as well.
Hmm.
So, it depends. I think, I never recommend it to clients. I think, spending the extra, $8 to $10,000 on a job to file is probably worth it at the end of the day.
Right.
To, make sure you're covered, at the end of the day, for the owner's sake. If anything happened, with my plans or anything, I have my architect's stamp of approval. There's less liability on me as the owner, and there's another shield of liability on that end. I had somebody licensed by New York State come in, check everything. Usually when you're doing it, somebody from the Department of Buildings is going to come also and check in on their work, and before they close out all the permits.
Got it. Got it. So I guess the next subject here, right?
Well,
What you were gonna say?
I was going to say we just started the initial process of the renovation. We went to starting to pick a crew. So
Right. Right.
after
That
you've
was
picked
that's
the
what I was gonna get
architect
into.
and you've got the plans, right? And now your team, you've chosen your contractors, right?
Hmm.
And your tradesmen, and you've sent this over to the management company and the board for the final approvals. You're picking your materials on the back end. Let's say management co-op board comes back, you've been approved to start work. Now you're on site. Usually your first step is going to be demolition, right? And in my case, it was literally taking everything out: the walls, the floors, the doors, the framing, the cabinets, the tiles, the toilets, the bathtubs, the fridge, the sinks, everything, you name it. The windows got replaced, so we took the windows out.
Hmm.
Everything was taken out of there, down to the, what is it, six cement slabs, right? Four walls, ceiling, and floor.
Hmm.
And then, that's the first step. You demo it. Um, this could happen, right? That's why it's also, you know, we recommend using crews that are very experienced, especially crews that have had successful jobs in that building in the past,
Hmm.
because they'll be familiar with the certain intricacies that can come up. Not all lines are the same. So sometimes after you do demo, there's things you notice that have to be changed to your plan because you didn't account for it in the past.
Okay.
So
Give us an example about that. Like like the line difference within a building. Like,
so we
is it
had
like
in
a
I'll
plumbing
give you
thing or?
yeah, I'll give you a specific example actually. So in 33 Greenwich Avenue, we've done a handful of sales and renovations there.
Okay.
The building, I think it's floors 2 through 10 are all the same, right? So pretty much all your plumbing lines, your gas lines, your risers, electrical risers, everything is running straight up throughout those lines. Once you get to floors 11 through the penthouse level, it's known as wedding caking when the buildings start to set back so you can have all your private terraces. So when the buildings start to wedding cake to create the terraces, that's when the lines change. Your bathroom starts to move, your kitchen layouts, everything like that.
Yeah.
Which instead of the lines running vertically up through the walls, they need to channel horizontally for the change of layouts. So that one drop ceilings sometimes because you need room to be able to put the piping there to run it across, right, vertically to
Yeah.
another space. So that's one issue you run into with that. And then the other issue you run into is, for example, we've done a handful of renovations in that building, but we were doing a two-bedroom line, and on the 14th floor, the lines change. So we were trying to open up the kitchen, and then what we realized was there was actually a support beam hidden, but the way the apartment had been renovated from years ago from the original owners of the building was that the beam was so hidden. It was behind kitchen cabinets, walls. You would have never known it was there. It wasn't just a framed out column or pillar. So we had no idea it was there. We did the demo and then we realized, hey, we can't open this kitchen because we had gas risers, we had the water plumbing stack, and we also had this support beam there. So by the time we had those three structures, it didn't make sense to open the kitchen. So we had to scratch the plan and change it.
Okay.
So that's an example of things that can change, right? So you do the demo, and sometimes there are small things that will change. You might get more room than you've realized, right? Because previous owners might have, reframed an apartment so that they didn't have to, skim coat walls and do things the proper way. So it just depends, right? So you have that. We do the demo. If let's just say for this case, everything stays the same, right? There's no changes. Then the next step after demo would be framing, right? And what framing does is that's creating your non-structural walls and sort of the skeleton of the house or the apartment, right?
Right.
And what we do with framing is that also allows for the ability for your electrician to come in and start running your electrical wires and outlets through the walls and through the apartment so that they're not visible, right?
They have a saying. You've probably heard this. I just when I love talking about it whenever the topic comes up in housing and in construction, right? Like you said, like foundations kind of like you're making the skeleton. Let's say right when you're framing, the framing is the skeleton. The electrical and the plumbing are kind of like the nervous system in a way, right? And then
Mhm.
you have the skin and muscle layer is all of the insulation and the sheetrock and the paint. But
Exactly.
I just wanted to add that in there. Go ahead. I don't want to disrupt your flow.
And pretty much you have that part. So you have the framing. Then what I had in my case was we actually went down to the cement floors, and we will show you an example of this in the future when we actually do a walkthrough of our renovation project. But in our case, when we pulled up the original hardwood floors, parts of the cement came up. So we also, after the framing, before we can run the electrical wires and then start to close up the walls, we actually had to re-level all the floors again throughout the apartment. So
Hmm.
in my case, that added another step for us. So we did demo, framing, then we self-leveled the whole apartment, right? After that, the electricians came in, ran all their wiring, ran their new space for the new outlets, dropped the ceilings to run their recessed lighting in the spaces that was needed. Once that was done, then our plumbers came in. They started to run the new plumbing. They also, in New York City, you're supposed to have plumbers touch the gas line. So the plumbers were in charge of touching any gas, installing new stoves and things like that. After the plumbers came in, installed all the new plumbing fixtures and made sure they were properly installed and hooked up to the main stack for the building.
Mhm.
Then the general contractors and carpenters come back in. They put the insulation, they put in the sheetrock, then they put in drywall, and they start to close up the apartment. Usually after that, we start to lay the hardwood floors. Once we lay hardwood floors, we typically put some sort of protective covering over it, right? And then put the base moldings in. While that's all going on, the plumbers are usually retiling. Sorry, not the plumbers. The contractors are also retiling the bathrooms,
Hmm.
installing the new vanities, installing the kitchen cabinets, things like that,
Got it.
and putting all the finishes back together. So it is a pretty elaborate step-by-step process. You typically have at least 5 trades on the job. Um, we have, for my job, we have a specific stone guy who comes, measures all the stone for the countertops, backsplashes, saddles for bathroom entranceways. I went with, quartz for my windowsills, so he had to come cut for that. So it just depends, but we have, I'd say five trades or so. We typically have a project manager. Because I'm experienced in the space, I acted as the project manager as well. And that's pretty much the process of it. You put the finishes together. After you put the cabinets in for the kitchen, then you install appliances, then you install the sink, then you install the countertops, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I
And
actually
then
had a little kitchen upgrade done in my apartment, which is a pre-war, not very fancy walk-up building that is in the family portfolio. And I elected to not go the full gut way, to save costs, but also to still benefit some improvements. And I used your team of people, and I was actually very impressed. All I did was swap out a couple of cabinets, added an extra row of cabinets, put a couple of custom cut pieces of stone, a new sink fixture, a cutout for the dishwasher, swap out a fridge. Nothing too like daunting from a logistical, you know, task. But like once we ordered the materials and the materials were ready to start work, once we started the work, it was done in under a week. I was really impressed. Like the team that we leveraged is I'm happy, man. I'm happy with the amount of money that I spent with what I ended up having. So it was pretty good. We were able to reuse the existing shaker cabinets on the top row of cabinets above
yeah,
the sink and the counters. It ended up looking really good. I'll try to find some photos to maybe share our editor so he can like include them in here or something like that. So is it tell me, man, so like you do this tons, you do this for a lot of people with a lot of real estate. Is it always worth going soup to nuts, full gut rehab? Or is there times that you've seen on your desk and trade where it's like, maybe we do a little bit of landlord special, maybe we do a little bit of, patching and cosmetics, and we don't really go soup to nuts because maybe we're not there for the budget, but we want to make sure that it's at least more rentable if it's an investment property or something like that. Do you have some cases like that that you come across?
Yeah, I don't think gut renovating an apartment is always the answer. I think apartments, if kept in good condition, can last 20, 30, 40 years easily with small improvements over time. Um, but yeah, as you said, there's little things you can do to really improve an apartment.
Mm.
Um, and like we said, right, it's whether it's, taking a kitchen that has old, white shaker cabinets or old brown landlord special cabinets from the 70s or 80s, right?
Mhm.
Cabinets are cabinets and those last a while, there's not much wear and tear on them. So, sometimes we have darker cabinets, and we have super dark and super busy countertops and backsplashes.
Mhm.
And sometimes all it is taking, the super busy countertop and backsplash and changing it out with something brighter and more neutral to, take your eyes away from the darkness, right? And the other stuff that's older. So a lot of the time we'll go into a kitchen instead of having to take the whole thing out. Typically people, end users specifically, right, are more willing to change out their appliances over time than they are their cabinets because it's less invasive
Right.
and less costly. So the chances that your appliances are in newer condition is much higher. So
Yeah.
that's something you don't have to trade out. So a lot of the time we get away in kitchens just changing out countertops, backsplash, sinks, and faucets. And then in the bathrooms, depending on the renovation, but if it's subway tile and it's old, we've saved a ton of bathrooms where we go in and we reglaze the whole thing, and
Let's talk about that. I've seen it in some YouTube videos where like people would talk about the magics of reglazing. Like, do you just completely eliminate the need for grout on between between each tile piece? That's kind of the idea, as I understand it, right?
it's sort of like the equivalent. When I explain it to clients, I explain it as almost painting your bathroom, right? You're painting your tiles practically,
Okay.
and you're giving it a second life. It's like if you were going into your kitchen and you had old cabinets and you're painting the cabinets to give it a second life.
Hmm.
Right, and I can't give you a dress, but I'll give you a real life example here,
Okay.
right? Just because it's an active rental.
Okay.
But I was talking to a client and their manager called me and said, "Hey, why don't we, do a full renovation to the bathroom? We have to reglaze the bathroom." And sometimes if it's just the tub that needs to be reglazed, you can just do the bathtub. If it's
Yeah.
the wall, though, you have to redo all the walls. You have to redo everything to make it uniform. It's just
Right.
how the process works. So in this case, we had to do tub and wall. So it's going to come out all in about $3,500 to $4,000, right? And this is an original bathroom from the 30s. The only
Did they
things
change? Sorry to interrupt. Did they change like the shower body or like?
we changed the shower head and we changed the vanity.
Okay. So no
So
adding of electrical, like no adding like
not
GFCI
in the
outlets.
bathroom, nothing.
Wow.
It's grandfathered in.
Wow.
It hasn't sold, so it doesn't matter. So, anyways, you pretty much have the bathroom, right? And it would be $4,000 to reglaze. We took that into account, and then we also took into account what would it cost us to redo the bathroom. We have to file the job because if we're going to do the bathroom, we're going to add laundry. It ran us probably with filing and everything about $35,000 to do a new bathroom and laundry.
Condo building.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we pretty much ran the numbers on that and we said, okay, we can do that. We took into account how much we can increase the rent,
Okay.
right? the rental amount by redoing the bathroom and laundry is probably almost to be conservative, a $700 or $800 increase, right? So if you did like 35,000 um, on that, you are looking at what's that 30 that would be about a 35-36 month payback period. Let's say if you're doing 1,000, right? So I think it was rounding up to 39 months, right? So you're about 3.5 years, let's say, payback period on it.
Okay.
Um, so we ran those numbers, which the owner wasn't too keen on having a 3.5 year payback period to do the bathroom, plus the hold period of waiting to renovate, which would probably take at least 30 to 45 days. So they weren't really, too into that. Then we did some more, diving, and we actually reglazed this bathroom 3 years ago, right? So now we actually looked into it today. Right? Now we're actually diving into it. It would actually make more sense to just redo the bathroom and, not have to reglaze for another 20, 30 years
How
and have it all new and
often
increase.
can you glaze? Sorry to interrupt.
You can glaze every year if you want. That's the thing about glazing. It's beautiful. It looks nice. Obviously, if I own the apartment, I tend to keep things in better condition. But what
Mhm.
people don't realize is once you reglaze a bathroom, you have to be a little bit more careful. For example, if you reglaze the tub, people like to take, these deep freestanding soaking tubs, right?
Yeah.
Or sorry, not freestanding, the drop-ins. And what happens is there's ledges on the sides between the tubs and the walls. So
Right.
people, if they don't have anywhere to put their soaps and stuff, they sit them on there. And what they
Yeah,
don't
true.
realize is over time that actually ruins that like glazing cover over the tub and the walls. And that's another thing that starts to actually deteriorate towards it and causing you to have to reglaze again sooner rather than later.
Hmm. So,
So
buyer
glazing's
beware of the
good. Yeah,
glazing, right?
yeah, exactly. Buyer beware. It's a good tool if you're more if you have more sticker shock, in the short term on something, right? Versus long term. Um, but I don't think every situation is the same. I think it depends on the price point, right? Of the apartment. I think it depends on what your goal is, right? If you're fixing and flipping and
Mhm.
it's to look nice, it doesn't necessarily have to be longevity. I don't really care if the glazing holds up 3 or 4 years. That's
Hmm.
buyer beware, and they better be keep it in good condition, or they can ask me for the contact for the glazer.
Hmm.
So I think it depends, things like that. I think, one big thing that's pretty important here is that, you know, a lot of people in New York City are very scared of doing a renovation,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. I've heard a lot of horror stories of people, you know, practically getting robbed, you know, on price. I've heard stories of contractors walking off jobs or, clients
Disappearing.
disappearing.
I've heard
Yeah.
it so many times, man.
Ruining jobs and then disappearing and not fixing it, right?
Yep.
So I think the most important thing is if you're going to do it is make sure you have a plan, make sure you have a team that's experienced and has done it before and make them show you that they've done it before. Get their referrals that you trust. Because that's where the most value is here. These are the hardest deals sometimes. But if you can stomach them, you get a customized apartment or home to exactly what you want within your budget, and there's usually the most upside there. I think our good friend Glenda Baker from Clubhouse,
Oh my God,
your
Glenda's
good friend
awesome.
Glenda Baker
The Atlanta
once
Queen.
once said that her strategy is if I take a client to the shittiest house in the neighborhood, you know, that house has the most upside to build equity. It has the best equity base. And I think,
They
you
call it a
know,
wedge deal.
and I think that is
The wedge.
exactly. And I think that is a very good point that is almost always true. And I think if you have the right crew and you can do that, a lot of these deals can be home runs.
Shout out to Clubhouse, by the way, man. That's how Mike and I actually met, guys. We became buddies on a social audio app that has fallen into obscurity before Twitter Spaces, now X Spaces was actually a thing. The real estate community on Clubhouse for a short period of time was electric. This was like during 2021. What a time to be on the internet that was. But
Exactly.
all right. So in essence, there's trade-offs in all of this. Buyer beware. Have your team ready.
Have a
Uh,
schedule.
have a
You know,
schedule.
if you can,
File if you
if your
can.
trades will do this, right? You can even go down to having a schedule with them and saying, hey, like, to your contractor, how many, days or weeks is it going to take for demo? How many guys you're going to have on site that day, right? Next comes in your electrician. Hey, how many days do you need for, running all the new wiring, right? And
Hmm.
all the stuff you have to do, and seeing how many trades are on each day for that. Same thing for your plumbers. Get timelines for everything, how many trades are going to be there. If you really want to be on top of it, you could have a project manager that's on site, right? Your
Yep.
GC should have a foreman that's on site overseeing all the trades as well.
Hmm.
And if it's about holding everybody accountable, being on top of everybody, and being super organized, right? If you have all your materials in place and you're ready to go, and you don't give your guys, a reason to walk off your job and go to another one because you're stalled, that's a huge plus. It's keeping the jobs moving, knowing what you need to do, having the processes in place, and it's really a beautiful thing when you're done. I have one of my best friends and a good client now. We hit a home run with his renovation, and he loved it so much. He's got the renovation bug. We're about to do our second one in 2 years.
I'm not
So
going to say his name, but I know who you're talking about, and he's great.
yeah.
Uh,
So
we're a big fan, and that's Rady, Mike's dog, the mascot of the Keeping It Real pod, saying hello.
hey, Rady, come here. We're done.
Bring her in here. Bring
Come
her
here.
to
Come
show
here.
her to the crew over here.
Come here. Come here, miss. You want to come here? Look. Come up and say hi to everyone. Come here. Come here. Say hello.
She's stealing the show, folks. Say hello to Rady. This is Mike's puppy, who's very not puppy sized, but she's a sweetheart.
Okay, go. We gotta finish. Okay. See you later. But yeah,
I love it.
it's a
I feel like we're
beautiful.
gonna get comments that everyone's gonna want Brady to be a fixture on our series that we're building out over here.
Yeah, but we'll go into the process a little more with everybody, how to file and
You know what we should do?
do.
We should take a camera and just record for like a good 20 minutes with like you and me. We'll walk through one of these active job sites that we're always walking through on the next go around. And like we'll even like maybe do some like time lapse related type stuff. You know what I mean? Like where we do like a periodic like every few day checkup on like the stages of things and see what we could do with it. I mean we're bringing to market a couple of different pieces that need a lot of renovation, so maybe we can use those case studies in the here and now. Um, so in essence, we kind of covered the macro of it. The micro of like budgeting and costs is really it's tough. Everybody in the audience, it's tough. Like you can't. There's so much nuance in construction and the type of product. Like you can be in a pre-war, like not even pre-war. Like you could be in a historically preserved landmarked building where you have like a ton of different elements to navigate on top of just the building departments, including landmarks. So I mean, there it can go as thick into the weeds as you want, and the higher end you go, the higher end the building, or the more historical the building, the more cost prohibitive things can be, and you have to be very diligent on who you hire, and you don't want to make rush decisions. That's kind of the idea of what we're doing with this educational series. You know, our goal isn't to end up, super famous from these pieces here. These are really conversations that we think that can be used for education and adding to the body of knowledge that exists out there on a topic that we do so much work in. So it's not for everybody, but if you're here, you wanted to be here, and we thank you. Mike, do you have any parting words?
I'd say if you're looking to do a renovation in New York, you know where to find me. My head is right here. We're always
Shameless
looking to
plug.
take on new clients for renovation product. And we also have a ton of, as Harry said, listings on market and coming to market that need renovation. So if you have capital and can stomach a renovation in New York City, you know who to call.
Oh yeah, side note to that, like we're bringing to market a couple of really interesting multifamily pieces as well. A whole host of different things that can use some sort of a condo conversion strategy or a multifamily buy hold strategy where maybe you modernize things a little bit. So, you know, things that need work is kind of our soup to nuts bread and butter. So again, shameless plug, contact us if you have any questions about learning about the construction process. Buying something that's old is actually a potential advantage. I witnessed my father build his entire empire on the backs of buying other people's headaches and riding out the ebbs and flows. And you don't have to make everything perfect, and you can be strategic with your reinvestment into the renovations and still get by and do well enough to do more than just pay your mortgage, for lack of a better word. So that's it for our second episode. We've been jamming for nearly 40 minutes. We're going to sign off over here. Hit us up below. We'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.